Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Pablo Picasso. Probably. Throughout many years of shonen manga, authors have paid tribute to their favorite series, whether they've left little hints in their own series that reference over to another series. For all of these authors that have done this, 9 times out of 10, they are actually just fans of the authors before they had their own successful series. And some of these authors are subtle in their approach and others not so much, which is where we enter Gege Akutami, and possibly one of the most inspired Togashi fanboys the shonen medium has actually seen since Togashi was in his prime. You see, Gege Akutami is the author of Jujutsu Kaisen, and throughout the years of Jujutsu Kaisen's publication, Gege has shown us time and time again just how much influence he's taken from Togashi's work. Whether it's references to Yu Hakusho or Hunter x Hunter, Gege never fails to pay these homages to his senior mangaka within the industry here. But at a certain point, people started to notice other connections between Jujutsu Kaisen and other major series. For example, Bleach and Naruto. And there's probably a few more mixed into the mix in there, and I'll let you guys figure those ones out in the comments below, as long as you hit that subscribe button, of course. But with the Bleach connection coming from these certain inspirations to characters and people, noticing how Yuji and Kajaku's relationship within the plotlines of Jujutsu Kaisen followed similar styles to Ichigo and Aizen within Bleach, and then obviously the Naruto connections started to flow in the early days of the publication, in which we found ourselves following a trio of characters, each with their own motivations and goals, and one of them all of a sudden had an ancient inner demon, and all three were led by a white-haired sensei who just so happened to be partially blindfolded. Sound familiar? Yeah, it should. And that's why people started calling it a Naruto clone, and obviously people started calling it a Bleach clone. But realistically here, there's a lot of similarities between Jujutsu Kaisen and these other series. But where Gege differs is in the brutality of the world that's presented through the narrative, and his unique author style that's creating an exciting chapter almost every week. And that has the hype building and building and building until the plot lines eventually reach its climax. However, in this video, I wanted to take a closer look into the similarities of Jujutsu Kaisen, Hunter x Hunter, and Yu Hakusho. And now, before we go any further, I want to preface this by saying I'm a massive fan of both the series in Jujutsu Kaisen and Hunter. I mean, I literally have Gon and Meruem tattooed on me, and Hunter x Hunter is one of my top 3 manga, the other 2 being Vagabond and Jujutsu Kaisen, in no particular order. So with that in mind, I'm coming at this topic from a place of love and respect to both series here. So with that being said, let's just get into the video. But first things first, we should look at the narrative for the 3 series here. And out of the 2, Hunter x Hunter and Yu Hakusho, Jujutsu Kaisen is like an amalgamation of the 2. You see, Yusuke, the main character for Yu Hakusho, is someone who dies and becomes a spiritual detective, and Yuji is someone who ingests the finger of one Sukuna Ryomen and is embroiled within the world of Jujutsu and curses. And both Yu Hakusho and Jujutsu Kaisen have these weird themes of the occult, horror, and Buddhist mythology, and you can find yourself countless theories relating to Buddhist mythology within Jujutsu Kaisen. I mean, there is theories out the wazoo for that. But even though the setup feels more in line with Yu Hakusho, Yuji Itadori's character more closely lines up with Gon Freecs and Gon's self-sacrificial nature, but that's kind of where the similarities and goals stop aligning. You see, Gon's self-sacrificial nature, that comes at the cost of him wanting to get stronger in order to find his papa, Jing Freecs, and along the way, that desire for strength and finding his dad gets him sidetracked in possibly one of the most greatest manga and anime arcs ever, in my opinion. But Yuji, on the other hand, he wants to gain power, not for himself, but to stop that power from growing out of control and harming anyone else. And Yuji acknowledges that that is a burden that only he can deal with, which is where we arrive at Sukuna Ryomen. Sukuna is a rather unique character when we compare him to the other series here within this conversation. Sukuna has no goals, no ambitions. Sukuna lives for himself and his pleasure only. He wants to fight, he will, and if he wants to eat, he will. And by his side, he has Kajaku and Umi, who are basically his lackeys, his friends. I don't know what you could call them at this point in the situation. And in this regard, he's very, very similar to the initial introduction of Meruem within the series of Hunter x Hunter, with Meruem pretty much existing by the same rules. He ate when he wanted and he fought when he wanted, and when I say fought, I mean decimating women and children, because literally no one could stand up to him. Their arrivals were similarly built up, but the pacing was different. Meruem's arrival was quick on the scene with the Chimera Ant showing hints of the Queen's pregnancy. You knew something bad was coming, something was brewing. But with Sukuna, what Gege did different here in this regard was have Sukuna be a constant threat throughout the story. Literally from issue 1, episode 1, Sukuna, he has taken over Yuji 3 major times times, and each time he's caused game-changing events to occur within the series. Every time Sukuna has appeared, he's like the Grim Reaper within the series. Something bad has happened. But the similarities between Sukuna and Meruem is the arrival of their true forms. That's where they shine through the brightest. With Sukuna's true form has been teased throughout the series. It wasn't until recently Gege introduced us to the specimen that was true form Sukuna, and that being was described as a perfect being. And again, the similarity here is that Sukuna's perfection also lines up with Meruem's perfection. While both of them look humanoid and different, they're both considered perfect beings within their verses. Sukuna being perfect apparently from birth, in the same way Meruem was perfect from birth due to his mother just simply eating the right foods, which led to his evolution and birth coming to be. And when I say right foods, I mean she had a human at some point, which is kind of fucking weird. Anyway, Sukuna's design obviously looks nothing like Meruem, and it actually follows more a similar look to Yusuke's form from Yu Hakusho, with Gege even throwing in a cheeky reference to the spirit gun that Yusuke uses when Sukuna is fighting Gojo. Speaking of which, Gojo vs Sukuna arguably held the biggest amount of references to Togashi's works, all condensed within 13 chapters, and was probably the most amount of references that we've seen, all condensed into one neat little bundle within the series so far. And these references encompassed everything from narrative parallels to visual nods and everything in between. On a surface level, Gojo vs Sukuna was like a modern day Meruem vs Netero, or even a Chrollo vs Hisoka. There can be comparisons made to both equally across the board here. I mean, on one hand, you have Gojo vs Sukuna, and it lends itself as this homage of Netero vs Meruem, and the fact that humanity's strongest warrior, Gojo, who in this instance would play the part of Netero, who within the Hunter x Hunter verse was regarded as one of the strongest hunters to have come about when he was in his prime, and possibly even past his prime, a man who spent years honing his skills in search of an opponent to help test his mettle and his strength against someone who was utterly grateful and expressed major gratitude to the fight ahead of him, which is in parallel to Gojo, someone who's regarded the strongest human sorcerer within the verse. And however, in this instance, Gojo is in his prime. He's not like Netero at this point. He's not past his prime. For all Gojo's skills and his techniques, they've all been honed in order to raise up the next generation. But in the background, Gojo wanted someone to understand him. He wanted someone who he could test his mettle against and fight against with his full power, in the exact same way that Netero did it. Netero stepped up to Meruem to not only save humanity essentially, but also as a way to express his love and gratitude for martial arts and everything that had led him on that path, which is where we enter Sukuna, who obviously in this case fills in the role of Meruem, a monster who's burst forth and is wrecking everything in his path simply because he wants to. A calamity. And in terms of their motivations and similarities, in this instance, Sukuna falls more in line with the Meruem that we are introduced to earlier on in the series of Hunter x Hunter, the one who slaughtered women and children simply to eat them. And as opposed to Meruem, we come to know and sympathize with later on in the story, the one who understands and wants to protect humans rather than hunt them for sport. Sukuna obviously doesn't end up taking this path, but these two end up in a fight to the death, only for Gojo to use a last-ditch effort to detonate a massive explosion. Does that sound familiar? It should. And not only does this explosion do some minor damage to Sukuna, it actually causes the events for Sukuna to evolve further a little later on down the line, which narratively, excluding a few minor details, it parallels almost exactly what happened with Meruem after the explosion of the poor man's rose. And excluding the narrative of Jujutsu Kaisen having a lot of similarities with Hunter x Hunter and Yu Hakusho, where Gege really and truly drives this home is throughout the visual nods and references littered throughout the series, but it's Jujutsu Kaisen's power system and its fights where Gege has truly taken a lot of inspiration from Togashi. For example, Gege's cursed energy has often been times compared heavily to Togashi's Nen within Hunter x Hunter, and it's very easy to see why. If you've read both series, it's very easy to see those connect. Not only are they both complex power systems deeply ingrained into the world, so much so that they almost end up becoming their own character in their own right, with cursed energy sequences like this where Gojo was teaching Yuji about cursed energy and Wing was teaching Gon and Killua about Nen. Both of these demonstrations use cans as their test subject, effects and the framing of them is almost too perfect. It's so reminiscent of Hunter x Hunter. And then you have binding vows within Jujutsu Kaisen, closely mirroring that of Nenpaks and with self-imposed limitations that allows for extra powers to be gained. And the biggest example of this would be Nanami using a binding vow to limit his power for a certain time, in comparison to Kurapika only being able to use chain jail on members of the Phantom Troop. And there is many more examples of this. You also have Miwa using a simple domain being compared to Nobunaga using his N in a radius exactly like Miwa's. I mean, and Meruem also did this exact same thing. However, his was the biggest blast of N that we'd ever seen within the series, and I don't think we've ever seen anything like that close in Jujutsu Kaisen. But imagine someone opening up a simple domain the same size as Shibuya. That would be the equivalent to that, basically. But there's so many comparisons here, especially with the binding vows and the way Nen works. And there's many more moments with Gojo Sukuna, and even in the series altogether, that just directly mirror panels from Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter in this just beautiful homage to Togashi. And but does that mean that Jujutsu Kaisen is a complete and utter ripoff? I mean, listen, if you've watched this video all the way through, you probably sat there thinking to yourself, yes, absolutely fucking yes. Or if you're like me and you've read both the series, that you'll know that these are just subtle homages, and you'd be surprised. And even though Gege has taken so much inspiration from Togashi's previous works, he's managed to create an incredibly unique and very well written modern masterpiece. And currently, Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the best-selling mangas in the current generation, at one point even surpassing the titan that is One Piece, which I think is a pretty impressive feat to do. And Jujutsu Kaisen has proved itself to stand shoulder to shoulder with the titans of the industry and stand out from the crowd with just how brutal the world is that Gege has managed to create. And it very often crosses that borderline demographic from shonen to seinen, and it just straddles that line perfectly. And I think that is part of the reason why Jujutsu Kaisen has been so successful and so special within the modern and current generation of manga, because not only is a fresh, unique experience, it's strangely familiar and nostalgic feeling. And Gege does this brilliant job of paying homage to great authors that inspired him in the likes of Togashi, Kubo, and Kishimoto. And there's probably more in that mixture here. But overall, Jujutsu Kaisen is something that gets flamed a lot for being a copycat manga. However, I'd completely disagree with that notion and instead argue that most mangaka are guilty to some degree of taking inspiration from other series or giving little nods and winks and references to their favorite mangaka and manga. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do. But that is everything from me. It's a subject that I've always wanted to talk about and dive into this because I really, as a fan of both of them, I really enjoy the comparisons and the parallels. But that is something that I've always wanted to do. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more comparison videos like this. And as always, I will catch you guys all in the next one. If you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe, as that always does help me out. And I will catch you guys all in the next one. Much love, big kisses, peace.